cameras, but hated each other behind the scenes. William Windom and Darren McGavin's bitter feud started over something as simple as acting style. The Emmy-winning Windom wanted everything structured and precise, while bad boy McGavin was instinctive and loose.
Our next guest, Darren McGavin, is one of the busiest and most sought-after actors around today, with more credits than most actors accumulate in their entire careers. He shows absolutely no signs of slowing down now after a 40-year career in the show business. A marvelous actor, Mr. Darren McGavin.
Things got nasty when Windom accused McGavin of stealing scenes, and McGavin fired back that Windom's delivery was unnatural. Now, the shocking truth about their Hollywood rivalry is finally out, and it's messier than anyone imagined.
And word tonight that actor Darren McGavin has died. Best known for his portrayal of a grumpy dad in the movie A Christmas Story, McGavin's television roles included Mike Hammer in the 50s and the cult classic Kolchak, the Night Stalker, in the 70s.
William Windom was born on September 28, 1923, in Manhattan, New York City. His name wasn't just a name. It carried history. He was named after his great-grandfather, a congressman who later became the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury under Presidents Garfield and Harrison. The elder Windom was a respected political figure from Minnesota and a devoted Quaker. His life ended suddenly in 1891 while delivering a speech at Delmonico's Steakhouse in New York City. William was the only child of Paul Windom, an architect, and Isabel Wells Peckham, a Southern socialite from Alabama. His mother, known as Lady by the family, later worked for the Smithsonian Institution. She lived long enough to see her son rise to fame before passing away in 1988 at the age of 89. William's childhood was far from ordinary. He traveled frequently with his mother across the Atlantic, growing up surrounded by culture, history, and privilege. This early exposure to the world shaped his outlook and, in ways he may not have expected, influenced his career. One of his most famous roles was in The Farmer's Daughter, where he played a Minnesota congressman. That connection to his great-grandfather's political legacy was impossible to ignore. Whether it was fate or just a coincidence, his family history followed him into his acting career. But he didn't follow the path of politics. He found his purpose somewhere else. In 1943, at the age of 19, Windom enlisted in the U.S. Army during World War II. He became a paratrooper in Company B of the 1st Battalion, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, part of the 82nd Airborne Division. His regiment played a key role in the European theater of operations. But before jumping into combat, he was selected for the Army Specialized Training Program. This allowed him to study at the Citadel, Antioch College, and the University of Kentucky. The program was designed to prepare soldiers with technical and academic training before they were sent to the front lines. It gave him discipline and resilience, qualities that would shape his future. When the war ended, Windom was stationed in Frankfurt during the Allied occupation of Germany. During this time, he enrolled at Biarritz American University in France, a temporary school set up by the U.S. Army to help soldiers transition back to civilian life. It was there that he discovered something unexpected. He took on the lead role in Richard III, a Shakespearean tragedy. That experience changed everything. After returning to the U.S. in 1946, he knew what he wanted to do. He trained as an actor at the American Repertory Theater, one of the most respected institutions in theater. For 15 years, from 1946 to 1961, he learned from legends like Ava Le Gallienne, Margaret Webster, and Cheryl Crawford. The training was intense, but it prepared him for a career that would last decades. He performed in classic plays like Henry VIII, What Every Woman Knows, John Gabriel Borkman, and Androcles and the Lion. His roles were varied. One moment, he played historical figures. The next, He was the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland. His training at ART led him straight to Broadway. In November 1946, he made his debut in Henry VIII and Androcles and the Lion. These productions were part of ART's repertory system, which allowed actors to perform multiple roles across different plays. In Henry VIII, which ran at Columbus Circle Theater before moving to Boston's Colonial Theater, Windom played two roles, Sergeant of the Guard and Garter, King of Arms. This was a serious historical drama that tested his ability to bring authority to the stage. At the same time, he performed in Androcles and the Lion, a comedic play by George Bernard Shaw. This show blended humor with deeper themes about religion and humanity, requiring precise comedic timing and emotional depth. William Windom started his television career in 1949 with the Philco Television Playhouse on NBC. At the time, television was still new, but it was growing fast. Actors who had built their careers on the stage were starting to move into this new medium, and Windom was among them. He didn't leave the theater behind, though. Throughout the 1950s, he balanced both, appearing in TV dramas like Robert Montgomery Presents and Hallmark Hall of Fame. These live anthology shows gave him a chance to play a wide range of characters. Audiences saw him in Studio One, Masterpiece Playhouse, and Kraft Television Theater, all of which were known for their dramatic storytelling. Windom had a way of making every role feel real. He could play intense characters with ease, and producers took notice. By the end of the decade, he had built a solid reputation as a talented and reliable actor. In the early 1960s, he moved to Hollywood, which opened even more doors. His first major success came in 1963 when he landed the lead role in The Farmer's Daughter. The ABC sitcom ran from September 20th, 1963 to April 22nd, 1966, and was loosely based on the 1947 film of the same name. Windom played Glenn Morley, a widowed U.S. congressman from Minnesota. His co-star, Inger Stevens, played Katie Holstrom, a Swedish woman who became his housekeeper and later his love interest. The role made Windom a star. He brought charm and warmth to Glenn Morley, playing a dignified politician who was also a loving father. His chemistry with Stevens was a key part of the show's appeal. Audiences enjoyed watching their relationship grow from a formal employer-employee dynamic to something more personal. The show stood out because it mixed humor with heartfelt moments. It tackled themes of family, politics, and cultural differences in a way that felt natural. Windom and Stevens were both already known for their performances on The Twilight Zone, but The Farmer's Daughter took their careers to another level. Sadly, Stevens passed away in 1970, just a few years after the show ended. Her death added a bittersweet note to the series' legacy. For Windom, the role proved he could carry a lead part in a successful sitcom, and it remained one of his most well-known performances. His next major role came in 1969 with My World and Welcome to It, a sitcom based on the works of humorist James Thurber. The show, which ran on NBC from September 15, 1969 to March 9, 1970, was unique because it blended live action with animation. Windom played John Monroe, a writer for a fictional magazine similar to The New Yorker. Monroe was constantly lost in daydreams, which were brought to life through animated sequences. Windom's performance captured Thurber's dry humor perfectly. Monroe was witty and sarcastic, but also relatable. The show mixed fantasy with everyday life, showing how Monroe's imagination clashed with the realities of work and family. His wife, Ellen, played by Joan Hotchkiss, and his daughter, Lydia, played by Lisa Gerritsen, grounded the character, making the show feel real, even when Monroe's thoughts went in wild directions. Despite its originality, the show struggled in the ratings. NBC canceled it after just one season, but critics loved it. In 1970, My World and Welcome to It won 2 Primetime Emmy Awards. It was named Outstanding Comedy Series, and Windom won Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series. The award cemented his status as a top television actor. Even after the show ended, Windom kept Monroe alive. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, he performed one-man shows based on Thurber's works, bringing the writer's humor to live audiences. His portrayal of Monroe remained one of his most beloved roles. Before these starring roles, Windom had already left a mark on television history with The Twilight Zone. One of his most famous episodes, 5 Characters in Search of an Exit, aired on December 22, 1961. Written by Rod Serling, the episode followed 5 strangers who woke up trapped inside a giant metal cylinder. Windom played an army major. The other characters, a clown, a ballerina, a bagpiper, and a hobo, had no memory of how they got there. They spent the episode trying to escape, debating whether they were dead, part of an experiment, or trapped in some kind of afterlife. In the end, the shocking truth was revealed. They weren't people at all. They were dolls inside a Christmas charity barrel for orphans. The episode became one of The Twilight Zone's most famous. Its eerie atmosphere, philosophical themes, and twist ending left a lasting impact. Windom's performance as the determined major helped drive the tension, making the mystery feel real. It was just one of several appearances he made on the show, proving his ability to handle complex and unusual roles. On the other hand, Darren McGavin's life started with chaos. He was born William Lyle Richardson on May 7, 1922, in Spokane, Washington. His early life was full of hardship. When he was just 11, his parents divorced. It was the middle of the Great Depression, and the court decided to give custody of him to his father, a traveling salesman. His father couldn't provide a stable home, so McGavin was sent to a Catholic boarding school. That didn't last long. Soon, he was moving from foster home to foster home. One of the places he ended up was a farm outside Tacoma, Washington. His father had promised it would be a good home, but McGavin soon discovered it wasn't. The bedroom he was promised turned out to be a cramped space off the kitchen. He was often alone and felt abandoned. To escape, he would wander to the Nisqually River, where he met a Native American family. He spent an entire summer with them, and it became one of the happiest memories of his childhood. But even when McGavin found peace, it didn't last. By the age of 10, he had already run away from home several times. He lived on the streets of Tacoma, finding shelter in warehouses. The people who took him in were dock workers and outcasts who taught him how to survive on his own. This time on the streets shaped his tough, independent attitude and gave him a drive to make something of himself. As he grew older, his life continued to be a series of unstable situations. His father tried to send him to more boarding schools, but McGavin hated the rules and would escape each time. One of his most difficult experiences was living on a farm again. He was promised a better life, but he was bullied and neglected. So, he ran again. McGavin's journey took him to San Francisco, where he lived on the docks as a teenager. He slept on piers, finding scraps of food where he could. He was homeless, but managed to survive. The longshoremen didn't turn him in to the authorities, and McGavin continued to live on the edges of society. Eventually, the police found him, and he was sent back to another school. It was a cycle that would repeat itself. Despite his difficult childhood, McGavin had a dream. He wanted to be an architect. After high school, he went to the University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, to study drafting and engineering. But his life took a turn when his English teacher, who also taught drama, asked him to help build scenery for a school play. McGavin had no experience in theater, but he was good at building things. He helped out, and that sparked his interest in acting. McGavin's passion for theater grew quickly. He worked at a local theater, building sets, and soon struck a deal to act in a play in exchange for his work on the sets. This was his first acting role. He dropped out of college after just 1 year and moved to New York City to pursue acting. There, he studied at the neighborhood playhouse under Sanford Meisner and joined the Actors Studio. McGavin's first big break in Hollywood came in 1945 when he worked as a set painter at Columbia Pictures. He used his position to land an uncredited role in the film A Song to Remember. It was a small part, but it got him started in the industry. From there, he built a successful career that lasted more than 50 years, becoming a well-known actor in films, television, and Broadway. His first major breakthrough came with Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer in the late 1950s. The show ran for 2 seasons with 76 episodes, bringing Spillane's hard-boiled detective stories to television for the first time. McGavin played Hammer as tough, but also sharp-witted, adding a sense of humor that made him stand out. The show was filmed in black and white, which gave it a classic noir feel. It tackled crime and corruption with a level of violence that some critics thought was excessive. TV Guide even called it easily the worst series on TV, but audiences disagreed. McGavin's performance kept viewers coming back. He played Hammer with a self-aware charm, even when the studio wanted him to stick to a more straightforward, tough guy persona. That choice made his version of the character different from later portrayals like Stacy Keach's in the 1980s. A year after Mike Hammer ended, McGavin took on another lead role in Riverboat, 1959 to 1961. He played Captain Gray Holden, a steamboat captain navigating America's rivers before the Civil War. The show offered a unique twist on the Western genre by replacing dusty frontier towns with water routes and historical figures like Abraham Lincoln. McGavin starred in 40 episodes, balancing action with character-driven drama. Behind the scenes, though, things weren't so smooth. Burt Reynolds, who played Ben Fraser for 20 episodes, clashed with McGavin. Reynolds later said that McGavin's dismissive attitude shook his confidence as a young actor. Their working relationship never improved, and Reynolds left the show. Riverboat only lasted 2 seasons due to declining ratings and production struggles, but McGavin's performance stood out. He gave Captain Holden layers, portraying him as a leader who constantly faced danger and moral dilemmas. In 1972, McGavin took on the role that would make him a cult icon. He played Carl Kolchak in The Night Stalker, a made-for-TV horror movie that became the most-watched TV film at the time, with over 33 million viewers. Kolchak was a scrappy reporter investigating a series of murders in Las Vegas, uncovering something far more terrifying than anyone expected. Audiences loved the mix of supernatural horror and dark humor, and the film's success led to a sequel, The Night Strangler, 1973, followed by a full series in 1974. Kolchak wasn't a traditional hero. He wasn't fearless or respected. He was persistent, frustrated, and always dismissed by his peers. McGavin played him with a mix of stubborn determination and sarcasm, making the character feel real. The show ran for only 20 episodes because McGavin grew frustrated with its repetitive Monster of the Week format, but its influence lasted far longer. Years later, X-Files creator Chris Carter credited Kolchak, the Night Stalker, as a major inspiration. He even cast McGavin as Arthur Dales in 2 episodes, honoring the character that helped shape the genre. More than a decade after Kolchak, McGavin gave one of his most beloved performances in A Christmas Story, 1983. He played Ralphie Parker's gruff yet lovable father, known simply as The Old Man. The film, based on Gene Shepard's stories, captured the nostalgia of a 1940s Christmas. McGavin's character was equal parts frustration and warmth, from his constant battles with the furnace to his over-the-top excitement when he won the infamous leg lamp. At first, A Christmas Story wasn't a massive hit, but over time, it became a holiday tradition. TV networks like TBS started airing it in 24-hour marathons, turning it into a must-watch classic. McGavin's performance was a big reason for its success. He made the old man feel real, short-tempered but caring, grumbling but affectionate. His best moment came near the end when he surprised Ralphie with the Red Ryder BB gun. The way he delivered that gift, with just the right mix of teasing and genuine love, made it one of the most touching scenes in holiday movie history. The 1968 TV series The Outsider brought together two actors with very different styles, Darren McGavin and Windom Windom. Their time on the show was brief but intense, both on screen and behind the scenes. The series, created by Roy Huggins, followed McGavin's character, David Ross, a private investigator who never truly fit in. Ross had spent 6 years in prison for killing a railroad policeman in self-defense. Pardoned at 25, he became a private investigator but never escaped his past. He lived in a run-down Los Angeles apartment, drove a battered 1957 Plymouth, and barely scraped by. Unlike the usual smooth-talking detectives, Ross was rough around the edges. He often found himself at odds with the police while taking cases involving eccentric Hollywood elites or corrupt businessmen. McGavin made Ross feel real. He played him as a man who had been through too much to care about appearances. His clothes were often wrinkled, his hair unkempt. One of his quirks was keeping his gun in the refrigerator, a small but memorable detail that showed how unconventional he was. The show's flashback-heavy storytelling added to its noir feel, often dropping Ross into dangerous situations before unraveling how he got there. Windom Windom guest-starred in at least one episode, playing a wealthy businessman. Though his role was brief, his presence added weight to the story. But off-screen, his time on set was marked by creative clashes with McGavin. Windom and McGavin had completely different approaches to acting. McGavin was instinctive and loose, often adjusting his performance in the moment. Windom was structured and precise, believing in rehearsing scenes to get every detail right. This led to arguments over how scenes should be played. Windom thought McGavin's approach was too messy. McGavin felt Windom was too rigid. Their disagreements became personal. Windom criticized McGavin's appearance as David Ross, calling it sloppy and unprofessional. McGavin pushed back, arguing that Ross was supposed to look like someone struggling to get by. He felt Windom's polished style wouldn't have fit the character. The tension reached a peak when Windom accused McGavin of trying to steal scenes by improvising in ways that drew attention to himself. McGavin fired back, saying Windom's over-rehearsed delivery made their interactions feel unnatural. McGavin had put everything into The Outsider, playing private investigator David Ross with the grit of an old-school noir detective. But from the start, the show faced problems. NBC wanted a detective drama, but didn't want it to be too dark. They forced changes that stripped away its edge. Ross lost his gun. Romantic encounters were toned down. McGavin himself called the early scripts cheap and chintzy. Production delays made things worse. 8 episodes were still being re-edited a month before airing. Even with all these struggles, McGavin's performance stood out. His character, driving a battered 1957 Plymouth, felt real in a way few TV detectives did. But without proper promotion, the show never found its audience. NBC canceled it after 1 season in 1969. Windom moved straight into something completely different. He starred in My World and Welcome to It, a 1969 sitcom based on the whimsical writings of James Thurber. He played John Monroe, a cartoonist whose vivid imagination often clashed with the routines of suburban life. The show blended live action with animated sequences, recreating Thurber's famous drawings in a way that made it stand out. Critics loved it. Windom won a Primetime Emmy in 1970 for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series. But there was one problem. It aired against Gunsmoke, one of the biggest shows on television. Viewership outside major cities was too low, and NBC canceled it in February 1970. Windom, not ready to let go of Thurber's world, later toured the country performing a one-man show based on the writer's works. McGavin, never one to slow down, jumped into the growing world of TV movies before landing one of his most famous roles. In 1974, he starred as Carl Kolchak in Kolchak, The Night Stalker, a series about a skeptical reporter investigating supernatural cases. It mixed horror, mystery, and humor in a way that audiences loved. The show lasted just one season, but its impact stretched far beyond that. Years later, the X-Files creator Chris Carter credited it as a major influence. McGavin's film career also took off. In 1983, he played the gruff yet lovable father in A Christmas Story, a role that became an unforgettable part of holiday movie history. Despite working together on The Outsider, McGavin and Windom never collaborated again. Not because of any feud, but because their careers moved in different directions. Windom focused on guest roles and stage performances, appearing in shows like Murder, She Wrote. McGavin thrived in TV movies and cult classic series. They crossed paths at industry events, but remained on separate journeys. William Windom's life was as full of surprises as the characters he played. He married 5 times, but his last marriage to Patricia Tunder was the one that lasted. They were together for 37 years, until he passed away in 2012. His first marriage was to Carol Kaiser in 1947, but they divorced in 1955. 3 years later, he married actress Barbara Joyce, though that only lasted until 1963. Soon after, he married Barbara Clare, the granddaughter of MGM founder Louis B. Mayer. That marriage gave him 2 stepdaughters and his first biological child, Rachel. By 1968, though, they had gone their separate ways. His 4th marriage to Jacqueline D. Hopkins brought 2 daughters, Heather Juliet in 1970 and Hope Teresa in 1973. That marriage ended in 1975, but that same year, he met Patricia. They married and had a son, Rebel Russell, in 1978. After years of short-lived relationships, he finally found stability. Patricia was by his side for over 3 decades. Outside of acting, Windom had a deep love for chess. He wasn't just a casual player, he was serious about it. His tournament rating with the United States Chess Federation was in the 1600s, which is impressive for an amateur. He was even featured in Chess Life magazine twice, where he talked about his unusual playing style. Chess was such a big part of his life that he once planned to have a giant rook as his gravestone. The piece would have been made from Nubian marble, topped with a compass rose, and inscribed with WW 1922 Wicca. The name Wicca had a personal meaning. It was connected to a girl he met during World War II and was also the name of his first boat. His interests didn't stop there. He once bought a small island in Windom, Minnesota, for just $1. The town was named after his great-grandfather, William Windom, who was U.S. Secretary of the Treasury under Presidents Garfield and Harrison. He was also a member of Abraham Lincoln's Kitchen Cabinet. Instead of building anything on the island, Windom turned it into a wildlife refuge. He saw it as a way to honor his family history, while also doing something good for the environment. Buying an island for the price of a cup of coffee was exactly the kind of thing he would do. Windom also had a passion for live theater. He became well known for his one-man shows, where he played humorist James Thurber and war correspondent Ernie Pyle. These weren't just performances, he put real effort into capturing the personalities of these historical figures. His James Thurber show earned glowing reviews, with the Washington Post even comparing it to Hal Holbrook's famous portrayal of Mark Twain. He toured the show across the United States, Canada, England, and even Hong Kong. His Ernie Pyle show was different, but just as powerful. It focused on the journalist's experiences during World War II and struck a deep chord with audiences. Many people knew Pyle's work firsthand, and Windom's performance made his story feel real again. Through these shows, Windom proved he wasn't just a television actor, he was a storyteller who knew how to bring history to life.